So, all right, our objectives for this meeting, this gathering of parents here, thank you again for being here tonight, whether digitally or in person. By the end of this meeting, I hope that you'll be able to identify if you are, in fact, where you need to be. While I'm up here and in front of everybody without kiddos around, I'm going to have my face mask off because I don't think there's that kind of projection. And if I am projecting, wow, that's impressive. So if you are, in fact, in the right place, we're also then going to go into a little bit more of our content stuff for parent side, because we started last week discussing the theme of faithfulness. What does it mean to have faith in a religious context and in a not religious context? How do those things kind of relate, connect? So by the end of the night, kind of our big objective for our parent meeting, something for you to think about as you're growing in your faith as well, because you are worth investing in, not just your kiddos. You have a faith life, and I believe you matter and you're important. So by the end of the night, we're going to make some big claims about faithfulness. What does it mean to be faithful? Has God been faithful to humanity? Feel free to ask big questions. This year is all about questions. So tonight, as I'm sure you figured out, we're here for a First Communion cohort. We've broken up the parents and the families who have signed up into, right now, 3 different cohorts to limit the number of people we have gathering at a given time. Like last year, we're going to be doing once-a-month meetings for those who are joining us in person. This time, rather than like a Monday-Wednesday group like we had last year, we'll just be alternating which Wednesday of the month you come on. So if you're here in person, you'll notice September 7th, this is for First Communion families. So everybody who's First Communion is here coming in person will come on nights on the calendar marked First Communion. If you're at home right now, it's entirely possible that you are in either cohort A or cohort B. Those groups, families that are in cohort B, will come in weeks on the calendar marked cohort B. I'll be sending out personalized schedules at the start of every month to help folks stay kind of up to date with this. That should contain a checklist of information of assignments to do over the course of the year, and I'll get into a little bit more of that now. The way that our program is structured, First Communion works as kind of an add-on to Family Faith Formation. Family Faith Formation is the core of what we do because, like I said, we believe in you guys as parents, and you guys are worth investing in. Growing in the faith together matters, and being able to share at often difficult topics with our children is important too. We want to give you guys a solid foundation so that you don't have to worry or that you have a good faith background when your kids become angry teenagers and start asking really hard questions that aren't a lot of fun to answer. So thank you for joining us here. That's my short answer to it. Specifically, as far as what we're going to do this year ahead, if you were online last week, you probably recognize this slide. I've added a little bit more to it just for clarity's sake, hopefully. For First Communion this year, we will have once a month in-person meetings. Congratulations, you're at September's. You guys are awesome. We'll also have, for the Family Faith Formation side of this, up to 2 activities per month out of these purple A Family of Faith books. They're the same ones we had last year. We're trying to make better use of that resource than what we were able to last year. So if you don't have those from last year still, then I would be happy to supply you with new ones. We've got them. So 2 activities out of that. We invite you to attend when you're not here in person via the interwebs, distance learning style, through Google Meeting, through Pear Deck, being able to join in these meetings, just the presentation side of this, which will go from 6:35 to about 7:05 on the same nights of the week as the other 2 meetings, right? So if you're not in First Communion cohort, you can, in this instance, you can plan on joining a web meeting for a half hour on Wednesday night, September 9th and September 23rd. Again, as you're able to, please consider joining those because content for the parent meeting will change from week to week. We'll be clipping along pretty quick, actually, and I enjoy going pretty quickly. The last fun thing about the Family Faith Formation side of this is a video reflection using the app Flipgrid. A lot of schools are using this. I enjoy Flipgrid myself. It's a place where we can do kind of a build community, even when we can't gather in person. So using Flipgrid will invite you to reflect on those 2 family activities that we do in a month in about a 2-minute video on Flipgrid. and to be able to respond to others, see what's working, what's not working, share struggles, share successes, because we are one community in faith. None of us have all the answers. None of us are going to do it perfectly all the time. So that's going to be our main community component. For First Communion specifically, we have a online component built into this as well using the app Seesaw. Your child preparing for First Communion, there will be a set of videos to watch online and a activity to do in their workbook to respond to via the app Seesaw on the weeks that you're not here. So again, that'll be detailed in a separate First Communion checklist that I'll send to you at the start of those months. So those two checklists, a family faith formation one and a First Communion one, kind of contain the synopsis of what we're doing. When in doubt, refer back to that, and then feel free to ask me questions, because there is no handbook to this year. We are all learning. I'm learning so much, and I learn a lot when you guys give me feedback. So please give me feedback so we can be all in this together. If you're doing this at a distance, and I know there are several families who are doing so, just remove that in-person meeting component. It goes from 2 digital meetings a month to 3 digital presentations a month. And likewise, it goes from 1 activity in Seesaw to 2 activities in Seesaw. That makes it really easy for us to switch in the event of an emergency, and that's been a driving principle behind what we're doing this year, is making sure that we're flexible in the event of an emergency. So we're also excited for the first time to offer a First Communion class on Tuesday nights in conjunction with the Luzi Esperanza Hispanic adult group. So if that would be more interesting to you than meeting on Wednesday night, if Tuesday night would work better for you, the children will be taught in English, but the adults can then meet in Spanish upstairs at the same time. If that would be more interesting to you, please let me know, and I'd be happy to connect you to that group. And lastly, as far as technical information goes for the year ahead, in the event of a COVID outbreak in the parish, in a cohort, anything like that, we will quarantine, by which I mean go to fully distance learning, cohort by cohort. So for example, if in cohort A, there's a case of virusy stuff, then we say, okay, cohort A is going to distance learning. But because families are segregated here, broken out by cohort, that should allow us, ideally, to continue meeting in person with other cohorts as long as possible. So again, cohort model intended to allow us to maintain in-person learning for those who desire it for as long as possible. If at any time you and your family would like to switch from distance learning to in-person learning, or in-person learning to distance learning, please let me know. We'd be happy to accommodate you and work with you in that regard and get you switched over. Whew, okay. I hope that wasn't too much. That was really fast. Good news is we're recording this presentation right now, and it'll be live on YouTube tomorrow afternoon. So if I did go through it too fast and you're kind of like, whoa, that was really overwhelming, don't worry, you can catch up on YouTube. I'll timestamp it and everything so that you know this is the informational part of the meeting. So I hope that is a comfort to you. As we move now into the content part of our night, building on last week's where we started our discussion, what is faith? And why should we have it in the first place? We have faith in God. Why should we have faith is going to be the focus of this week's topic. Why should we have faith at all? So we're going to start with a Pear Deck question. So I hope you got signed in earlier. If you didn't, now would be a great time to do so. So again, we've got the code there in the top corner. Go to joinpd.com on your phone. You'll be able to text response to this question. And using that, we can kind of see a little bit of what's going on in the room, what people's thoughts are about these questions. Anonymously, I might add as well. So don't you worry. You can say whatever you want. It'll be shared anonymously. So as you get signed into that, give folks a couple minutes. Looks like folks are almost. Code is NFALUS. New flashlights always lift underwhelmed submarines. The weirdest thing about Pear Deck is also one of its most charming things, I think. I'm a nerd. That's my anthem, by the way. I'm a nerd. Yeah. You'll see. Oh, yes. New flashlight. I did not type that in, actually. All right, looks like most folks here are good to go. So we're going to hop on to the question. Actually, this is a two-parter. So you should be able to respond on your phone. There's a little green button on the bottom. If you're at home, you should have a bar to the side. What is faithfulness? What is unfaithfulness? What are these things in comparison to one another? We'll take just a couple minutes to type in responses to this. And then we'll show some of them up on the board anonymously. Okay, we'll just move on. Somebody out here in the audience then, one thing that corresponds to faithfulness, one thing that comes to mind with faithfulness. What is faithfulness? Yes?
I think it's remaining true and committed to someone or something.
Remaining true or committed to someone or something. Repeating that for folks at home. Okay, I like commitment, truth, solid. Something else to add on that, maybe one more idea to add to what is faithfulness? Trust. What is commitment without trust? No kidding. How about then unfaithfulness? What is unfaithfulness in juxtaposition against that? Non-trusting. So you, sir, are an astute observer of facts and things. Okay, building on that, one more thing. I'll do the teacher wait.
Not remaining true and committed.
Not remaining true and committed. Trust, truth, commitment, right? Kind of the differentiating distinctive things in this, at least for now, for what is faithfulness versus unfaithfulness. So from last time, quick review. We talked about faith in probably the best example we have of like what faithfulness can be. One of the best examples is a marriage, like a faithful marriage. One of the best places we see faith lived out. The scriptures also give us a really good example of what faithfulness, fidelity can look like. So as we talk about what do we have when we say we have faith in God or in one another, the Old Testament, especially the book of Exodus, gives us kind of three big words at this point to work with. Emeth, which means fidelity or truth. Natsar, which means continuing, like enduring, it's guarded, it's protected. God is, or if you're being faithful, you're continuously protecting, guarding, or nurturing that thing you're faithful to. And then love. In Hebrew, chesed, which means a kind of covenant love or faithfulness. It's more than just the feeling of love, it's a commitment and a perseverance in a merciful, willing the good of the other as other, without any conditions. Unconditional love, Hebrew, chesed. It's a very complicated concept that we are going to come back to a lot this year because I love it. So, three words to think of. We also covered that the Catechism of the Catholic Church defines faith as man's response to God, and what does it say? Who reveals himself to and gives himself to man and woman. But that's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to respond in faith to God. Why? I think it's a fair question to ask. My big theme for this year is the big questions of faith. Because this has been a year for a lot of folks that has rocked a lot of faith lives. It made us ask questions, and that's not a bad thing. So I want to explore tonight, why should we have faith in God? Why is God somebody worth responding in faith to, as you would respond faithfully to a husband, wife, or friend? So now back to Pear Deck, and we'll see if this works better this time. What makes faithfulness easier? What makes faithfulness harder? What are some of those things? If you wouldn't mind describing those, we'll take just a couple minutes on this one again. Okay. Gosh darn it. Pear Deck not coming through when I wanted. Come on, bud. You and me are going to have a talk. Okay. What is faithfulness? What makes faithfulness easier to start with? Again, we'll just say a thing. Shout out a thing that makes faithfulness easier. Prayer? Love. What was that one? Communication? Yeah. Prayer and communication, almost kind of a similar thing. Yeah. Love. Absolutely. It's Not easy to be faithful to something like a horrible job that you don't love. Yeah, cool. What about what makes it harder? What makes faithfulness to something hard? Being treated by others, especially probably if you're being treated poorly, right? Hold on to that thought. Good point. Other ideas?
Well, I thought strong belief system makes faithfulness easier.
A strong belief system. Okay, there's a lot of directions that can be taken, right? If you have strong values or you value something very much, then you're probably more likely to act through on those even when it's harder, which, depending on the situation, can be a good or a bad thing, right? I mean, if you're like me, then I valued some things in my life I've valued so much, and probably wrongly, to the extent that I held on to them a lot longer than I should have. Bad relationships, bad wisdom, things that I thought, oh, this is the way how it's going to work. Wisdom, or sticking to a doctrine that, or a dogma in my head that I had made up that I shouldn't have stuck to, right? But yeah, what makes it harder? So lots of ways that can go. I agree. What I want to start with tonight, kind of connected to that, is what's necessary for faith. What's necessary for faithfulness? After this is my personal reflection, not church teaching, but I just want to offer this up to you. Take it if it's good. If it don't work for you, throw it away. You guys can do what you will with it. But in my analysis, faith requires two things minimum: a promise or a commitment to a relationship of some kind, and then being able to and actually following through on that promise, whether that's a contract with an employee or a supplier or somebody like that, or to a spouse. You make a promise, you make a commitment, you give your word, or you make a relationship, and then you follow through with what you say you're going to do. So, big question then, if that's what faithfulness is or looks like, and what we need for it, and we need trust, and we need, to have a loving relationship with this, if that's what faith is, has God been faithful to us? I think it's a fair question to ask. How are we supposed to respond in faith if God has not been faithful to us? Because if God has been faithful to us, then perhaps we have a reason to do so. We can have a reason to be faithful back. So let's start with some of the Old Testament promises. Admittedly, the first scriptural promise, one of the first ones we see explicitly made in the Old Testament, is when God promises this to Noah. And we all know the Noah story, right? I will establish my covenant with you, that never again shall all creatures be destroyed by a flood. Now, for a God of love, that to me seems like a pretty low bar. I will not destroy all the things that I love, right? So I'm like, as I'm going through and working through this, I'm like, that's, an interesting promise. Thank you, God, for making that promise. I think God has followed through on that one. We have not been destroyed by a flood. But can we go further? What else has God promised in the scripture? The next big promise we find in the Old Testament that God is determined to follow through on, or says he will follow through on, is his promise to Abraham and the Israelites who follow after him. And to Abraham he says, go forth from your land to a land that I will show you. First promise, I will make of you a great nation. A lot of people are coming from you. Promise 2, I will make your name great. I will make you famous. I will make you known. And not just known, but rightly known, right? Famous in the best sense of the word. And final piece of that, all the families of the earth will find blessing in you. Your name isn't just going to be great. Your name is going to bless other people. And other people are going to have better lives, be happier for having known you and for having known your descendants. 3 big promises to Abraham. So again, breaking those down specifically, God promises a prosperous descendancy. All of Abraham's family will prosper. Afterwards, that I will make your name great, that he will be revered, respected, loved by all peoples of the earth, whether they're his family or not. And the last one, that he will be a blessing through his family, through his descendants, to all the families of the earth. That promise is so core and central to the story of the Bible that God reiterates it multiple times. Most notably when Abraham's descendant, King David, comes onto the scene, and David says, I've finally carved out a land for Israel and all the people of Israel, and I want to do something great for God in return because God has brought me all this good things. And so then at that point, God in a vision basically reiterates all the same promises he made to Abraham to David and says, you just wait, I'm going to finish this. I will assign a place for my people Israel, a numerous and vast people. I will make your name great. You don't need to even worry about making my name great, King David. I will make you great. And then your throne shall be established forever, and by your throne, by your kingdom, the whole world is going to be blessed. And then guess what? You go to the book of 1 Kings, and God really seems to pull through because you get King Solomon after King David. And if you read these scriptures about King Solomon's reign, it's like Israel was wealthy, there was not poverty in the land, Solomon was a wise king, and people came from afar to hear Solomon's wisdom. His name was great. Israel was prosperous. And by knowing and connecting with King Solomon, the scriptures present the story that everyone was blessed through Solomon. This is great. This is awesome. God has pulled through and has made it happen. What happens next in the story? Well, Solomon fails. His heirs go on to cause civil wars and division that splits all of Israel apart into two nations first, and then, all of them into exile. Go back, friend. The kingdom of Israel and Judah is besieged and ransacked, and people are carried away into slavery, not to return for like 100+ years. So, heavy note. And back to Pear Deck. Thinking about that, this is our big question for the night, right? And this is what I want to build on in the coming weeks. Does this story, kind of this look at the Old Testament, for instance, the big arc of the Old Testament, does this prove God to be a faithful God? Does the evidence show he's faithful? Does the evidence show he's been unfaithful to humanity? Has God made a promise that he hasn't followed through on? At least at this point in the story, right? So I want you to consider this one. If you've got Pear Deck, this is a challenging question. I feel kind of bold and brazen to be standing here in the sanctuary and asking if God has been faithful to humanity. But I think it's important because I don't want to be up here talking to you about what I think your faith is. You know, if you've got questions, I want to hear them. You know, if you've got challenges, I want to hear them. Because, yeah, we'll all grow by sharing the challenges in our faith. So if you feel comfortable responding to this one, go for it. Otherwise, ponder it, contemplate it. Thank you. Okay. So that's that. Next week, I want to pick up on this because clearly something's not working if God's promises aren't seemingly fulfilled, right? This is where we have to transition from an Old Testament faith to a New Testament faith. What will it take for God to fulfill the promises he has made to humanity, particularly to David and to Abraham? And what will it take for humanity to faithfully respond to those promises? Because it's a relationship. Any relationship of faith is complicated at times. Marriages are complicated, friendships are complicated. What will it take to make this relationship between God and humanity work? And how can we be faithful to one another? That's what we'll explore in a little bit more detail next week. So I apologize for the heavy dump this week, but heavy dump to set up some fruitful talk on what faith is next week. So next Wednesday, as we come to the end of our presentation here, next Wednesday in-person meeting will be for families in cohort B. So First Communion families, if you're here in person, don't worry, you don't have to come next week, but we'd invite you to chime in online with our adult presentation just to see where this goes. We will have, again, different content for parents, but same time, only the half-hour first bit here will you need to join for. At the end of class today, we'll have time to pick up any of the purple books you might need and get going on the one activity for September that's in there. on your checklist. And as soon as possible, I invite you to download Flipgrid, which is an app, to your phone. You should, again, have the login information for Flipgrid on the apps that I sent you, or on the checklist I sent you. Sign into Flipgrid. We've got an icebreaker assignment. Feel free to introduce yourself to all the folks who are joining us for Family Faith Formation in our group, whether cohort A, B, or First Communion, that way. So if you still have any program questions or anything like that, please enter them in Pear Deck now with your family name, just so that I know who to respond back to. Folks at home, thank you for joining us. You guys are off for the evening. And now for the folks who are here in person, we will continue with some more silent prayer, kind of reflecting on the themes for the night, and breaking open tough questions again, but not with presentation this time. So thank you for folks at home, and we'll carry on here in just a moment. Stand up, stretch your legs if you want to. It's okay to not sit for a long period of time. We'll resume in about, like, I don't have my phone, 2 minutes. I'll look at the clock in 2 minutes from there.